Okay, so we are doing a lidded container. So you're gonna need 2 pieces of clay, one for the container part, one for the lid. The bottom container part is really nothing new, so I'm gonna go through that part fairly quickly. The new stuff is all in the lid. So I'm gonna spend more time on the lid. Stop me if you feel like you need me to stop and ask questions for the container part, but I am gonna go fairly quickly. So essentially, I'm showing you how to make a lidded container. This project is required to be on the wheel. Size requirement? None. It just has to fit something. Okay, so if you hate the wheel or you have a really hard time on the wheel, you don't have to make it huge. Okay, so bottom part is nothing new. It's just a vessel. And then the new stuff comes in on the lid. So if you'll notice, there's this indented part. That is our stopper. It's called a stopper because it stops the lid from coming off. So that part actually fits down into the container. So we're gonna have to take a lot of measurements, and then I'm gonna show you how to wheel throw the handle as well. This one happens to be hollow. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to do that. If you are making a really small handle though, it doesn't necessarily need to be hollow. So we will talk about all those things. We are gonna make the bottom part first. You always wanna make the bottom part first. It's easier to make a lid that fits to the bottom rather than a bottom that fits to the lid. So we are going to get this centered, full speed to center. Okay, remember we're gonna anchor in, flex your biceps. We want our hands to be mitten hands, and we want them to be straight up and down. We don't wanna let them angle, okay? So I'm gonna cone up, cone down. How many times do I need to cone up and down?
2.
Yep, at least 2. If you love coning up and down and that really helps you center, then you can keep doing that to center. I don't love coning up and down, so once I cone down this second time, I'm gonna switch my method. So a couple things, remember that while you're centering, the center point should always be the highest point. Also with centering, we don't wanna get that mountain, and so I always kind of push my pinkies in a little bit more so that I know that that clay is not sneaking out. Think gumdrop shape, and then again, your hands should always be straight up and down, and mitten hands, okay? So don't separate your fingers. So now that I've coned up and down twice, I'm essentially going to squeeze everywhere and try to force it into the center. So you're not gonna see the shape of it change much. I am feeling for it to stop wobbling, okay? So I'm gonna squeeze in, I'm gonna push away, and I'm gonna push down with my thumbs. Make sure that your fingertip or the tip of your thumb is not down. You're kind of using this part of your thumb, and I kind of cross them. You're really just making sure that it doesn't cone up, okay? Again, I'm anchoring, so I'm pushing everywhere, not really changing the shape, and the goal is that it stops wobbling. So it looks like I'm doing nothing, but I was squeezing in on all sides until I felt like it stopped wobbling, then I really carefully released my hands, okay? So, looks pretty centered now. So now I'm gonna go ahead and make my hole. So I'm gonna hover. Remember, we're either gonna have 2 hands working together to complete a job and they should be touching, or we're gonna have one working, one supporting, okay? So in this job, my thumbs should be touching at all times. Don't let them separate, okay? So I'm gonna hover and I'm gonna start pushing down for my hole. Okay, and my thumbs are gluing together as I push down. My fingers are supporting to help my thumbs stay centered so that things don't get wobbly. Okay, I'm gonna push down enough that I make an obvious stitch, and then I'm gonna open it up. Again, I'm always keeping everything tucked in and steady, okay? And I'm using the splash guards to help keep me steady as well. So pulling out a little bit so that I can get an accurate base measurement. I'm not pushing up against this hand, I'm just using it for support. Okay, and then I'm gonna take my sponge and I'm just gonna flatten and even the base so that I get an accurate measurement. Okay, I'm gonna stop my wheel, grab my needle tool, and I'm gonna push it down right in the center. I'm gonna put my finger where the clay stops on the needle tool. Okay, what are we going for? Quarter of an inch. We're there. So we're good. We're ready to move on. If you were wanting to make a wider bottom part, you would keep opening it up. If you're going for tall and skinny, then you could probably start pulling. Just remember that the width of the base is what you're looking for right now. You're not worried about the overall shape. You're just worried about how wide you want your base to be. So if you want a short and fat container, then you're gonna wanna keep opening this up until the bottom part gets as wide as you want the bottom part to be, okay? I'm gonna keep it here, and I'm gonna start pulling up my walls because I'm happy with that width. So now I'm going to go ahead and start pulling up my walls. I'm gonna slow down just a little bit more. Remember, further along in the project, the slower your wheel is gonna go, just never snail speed. So in this step, 2 hands working together, which means that they are touching, okay? You shouldn't be pulling walls like this. You're gonna squeeze unevenly, and then you'll have a wobbly mess. It is really important that the bottom part stays nice and even because we want the lid to fit on there flat, okay? So I'm gonna start pulling up. So I am touching my hands together. I'm still all tucked in, and you wanna squeeze up and in, okay? So I'm gonna start at the bottom, and I'm gonna squeeze up and in. Okay, making sure that I'm not letting it get too wide. So I was angled in, and even then it still is more cylindrical than anything. The other thing that you wanna be careful about as you start pulling your walls, you don't wanna dig into your base thickness because we just got that to where it needs to be. So just be careful with your inside hand that you don't dig into your base. And we just wanna make sure that we're going nice and steady up the side. I'm gonna pull again. Okay. If you feel like it's getting too wide, give it a little hug before you move on, okay? So that top part felt like it was getting a little bit wide, so I made a V and gave it a little bit of a hug. We're not worried about the overall shape of the vessel yet. We're just worried about wall thickness right now. Okay. All right, thickness feels pretty good now. Okay. So now you can shape it. So kind of just decide what you want it to look like. Do I want it to come out here? Do I want it to come in? Just kind of have to decide what you're going for. Maybe I want it to look like an hourglass a little bit. Okay, but you're essentially, I'm not squeezing it anymore. I'm just carefully pushing the wall in the direction that I want it to go. Okay, I'm gonna slow it down even a little bit more. Make sure you have a plan in mind, in mind, because I think that's kind of ugly. I had no plan. Okay, I'm gonna kind of clean up all of the slip, make sure that there's no standing water or slip hanging out in there, because when it dries, it's gonna cause it to crack. And then the other thing that I'm gonna make sure of, on containers, I like to really make sure I have a nice flat top part so that my lid fits on there really nice and flat, okay? And then last thing I'm gonna do is cut my foot. That's really ugly, guys. Let's do this. How about that? Oh, that's cuter. Okay, so have a plan in mind. You guys feel better about this? I know you were all very worried about the shape of my lidded container. Okay, just don't overwork it. That's the other reason that it helps to have a plan. The more you work with it and add water to it and change its shape, the more it's just gonna wanna collapse. Okay, I feel better about that. And then last step, I'm going to cut my foot. Okay, so I'm gonna take my rib, And I'm just gonna cut all that excess off so that it looks really nice at the bottom. And when it dries off the bat, it will look nice, okay? Now, this needs a lid now. Can I let this part dry out? No, why not? If I let this dry out, so what? Why shouldn't I? Any guesses? What do I still need to make? The lid. What happens to clay when it dries? It shrinks. So if I were to let this dry, it would shrink, but then I need a lid. So if I take measurements from any state other than where we are right now, it's gonna be a different measurement than what I need. So really, really important that we take measurements now, okay? So in walk the calipers. Okay, I've got two different kinds of calipers. They both work exactly the same. If you're doing really wide, I would go with these ones because they work a little bit better for wider things. If you're doing somewhat narrow, the red ones work fine. And just a reminder for the red ones, this measurement and this measurement are exactly the same. Even it's like an optical illusion, but they really are, okay? So we need two measurements because if we look at this one, okay, we need the measurement for the outside of the lid to make sure that it's not gonna fall in, it's not gonna be too small, right? So we need the measurement for the outside of the lid, and then we need the measurement for the stopper so that it fits down in. So we need two measurements. So we need a measurement that is right outside your lip, your top lip, and we want it right through the middle because that's the widest point, okay? So what I would recommend, as soon as you're done with the bottom part, you're gonna take that measurement. I would go to your sketch page, trace the ends of these, and then put outside measurement right in between. You cannot keep these in your shelf space, okay? So I'm gonna get that measurement, and then I'm also gonna get the inside measurement. I think it's easier to use this side of the calipers for the inside. So we need inside the lip, and we don't necessarily want it touching the inside lip. We want it maybe 1/8 of an inch in on each side, okay? And then again, you can do either one, trace, and then out or inside measurement. Now, if you want a lid that overhangs, that's totally fine. Just know for your outside measurement, you wanna make sure that you account for that overhang. I wouldn't make it overhang too much, but you certainly can if you would like, okay? I'm gonna have mine be pretty flush with the outside. So I'm gonna put this to the side for a minute, and I'm gonna go ahead and start my lid. So we're gonna center as usual. Okay, we're gonna cone up. Okay, and then once we're centered, because lids are pretty flat, once I get this centered, and you don't want to do it before you get it centered. Once I get it centered, so now I'm pretty centered, I'm actually going to flatten the whole thing just a little bit, okay? So I'm pushing down like right here, okay? So I'm kind of flattening the whole thing out a little bit. I'm adding a little bit of pressure on my fingers just to keep it centered, okay? So I'm going to flatten, and this will help you kind of already start to get the width of your lid, okay? So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the heel of my right hand, or whichever side of the wheel is going away from you, okay? I'm gonna take the heel of that hand, and I'm gonna start pushing down like a donut, kind of, or a moat. And you're gonna see this knob thing come up in the center, which is gonna become the handle of my lid, and then it'll start to flatten. If you do not want to wheel throw your handle, so there were a couple examples on the PowerPoint where the handle was hand-built. That's the only part of this that could potentially be hand-built. If you know that you're gonna hand-build the handle of your lid, then you can just keep flattening this whole thing, okay? I would like to show you how to wheel throw your handle. So I'm gonna let this lump come up in the center, and then I'm gonna use the heel of my hand on the outside. Make sure you're not doing both, because you're gonna push unevenly and then you're gonna have a wonky looking lid, okay? So, left hand is holding my right hand just for support. And then I'm gonna start pushing down. So you can probably already see where this is going. Okay, and I wanna flatten this. I wanna keep it closer to 1/2 inch though, because we need to have enough thickness to put our stopper in there. I'm gonna keep my thickness closer to 1/2 inch. Otherwise, you're gonna have a really fragile lid, okay? As I start to flatten it, if you wanna switch to your sponge, you can. Just make sure that you're staying on one side. You're not pushing on both sides. Okay, keeping it closer to 1/2 inch. I'm not concerned about my measurements quite yet. And then this knob thing, we're just letting it hang out for now. Alrighty, so now my thickness is right around 1/2 inch. So now I'm gonna grab my outside measurement first, okay? So I'm gonna grab outside, okay, my lip. And that is where this needs to be. So clearly I have more width than I need right now, so I'm gonna cut that off. You can kind of make a mark like this before it's moving, because we'll have to cut off everything, this like ring. Or if you're super brave, you can touch only the side that's going away from you, and it'll kind of make a ring. So that'll tell you where you need to cut. That can be scary though. Make sure it's on the side that's going away from you. So then I'm gonna take my needle tool and act like it's like a little drill, okay? So you wanna hold it straight up and down. Don't angle it at all, because that'll angle your cut. I'm gonna tuck my elbows and I'm gonna get everything nice and tucked in and steady. And right where I made my mark, I'm gonna push in. You wanna push slowly and you wanna make sure it stays right there, okay? If you move it, you'll get this spirally thing and you could potentially destroy your lid. So, staying really steady. I'm gonna push it until it hits the bat. It'll make a lovely sound. And then I'm gonna pull it right back out, so you should just have one ring, okay? Now, this ring is currently stuck to my bat, so we also have to loosen that up. So I'm gonna take my needle tool, I'm gonna push it under just this part. You don't wanna push it under this part. So I'm gonna push it under, and then when I stop my wheel, I should be able to cut that ring off, okay? We can then clean that up a little bit. You can use your thumb, you can use the rib, you can use the ribbon tool. I'm going to kind of smooth that edge out with my sponge. And then I want to check my measurement. As long as you got close to your mark. So I cut a little bit too much. There's a little bit of space. That is a problem, because as it shrinks, my lid would fall in, okay? But I can kind of fudge it a little bit. So what I can do is just push it out a little bit more, because I still have all of this clay. So I'm just going to pull from that center part, and I'm gonna pull it out a little bit more, okay? If you didn't cut enough, but it's just barely, wait, did I say that right? If your lid was still too big, essentially you could just kind of push it back in a little bit. So as long as you get close to your mark, we can fix it. So I'm gonna push it out a little bit more. It's really important that your measurements are pretty right on, okay? All right, let's check that now. All right, I'm gonna go even a little bit more. Okay, because we don't want your lid to fall in. That would not be good. Okay, this should do it. Yep, okay, that's great. So now I need to make my stopper. So now I need my inside measurement, okay? Remember, we are gonna make it just inside. So give a little bit of wiggle room. We want it to fit in there easily, not like a puzzle piece. So I'm giving maybe like a 1/16 or an 1/8 on either side. And then what we're essentially gonna do, it's gonna look like I'm cutting a foot, but I'm gonna keep cutting in until we get to the right measurement, okay? So I'm gonna start with my rib. And just like you cut a foot, I'm gonna start in with my rib, and then I'm gonna switch to my pinky, okay? Because this is what we're making right now. So we want it to be prominent enough that it acts as a stopper, but I don't know, I think pinky works great. So, well, we can't get that right now. So I'm gonna push in. This outside edge is gonna flip up a little bit. Okay. Where are you going?
I was supposed to leave at 2:30, but I didn't get a note. And so I've been waiting, and then my mom texted me.
Just go into the call.
Yeah, just go. That's fine. You're welcome. Okay, so you're gonna notice that this outside lip pops up. We're gonna fix that, okay? So I'm pushing in. Oh my gosh, okay. Hold on, let me.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Hello. Hey. She's on her way out. Yep. Oh, okay, gotcha. No problem. Yep. Thank you. You're welcome. See ya. Okay. So how do we measure this? So we can't measure it quite like we did for the outside. So we're grabbing that inside measurement and you have to slide it, okay? So you have to slide it. If it hits, you haven't pushed in enough yet, okay? We need these to essentially slide through, just grazing that stopper, okay? So I'm gonna keep cutting in with my pinky. It just takes off a little bit at a time. And then I also like to go in, because your pinky is rounded, you're gonna have this little part that's sticking out at the very bottom. So I like to then go in, that's where your rib is good, because you can get that part right where the bat meets your clay. Okay, and then we're gonna go in again. Okay, we're getting closer, but I'm still running into it, so I need to cut in more. Okay, let's try again. And we're there, okay? So, your caliper should slide through, and I went a little bit small, but it should kind of just graze, okay? So they should slide through, but they should just graze that stopper, okay? I'm gonna check that measurement one more time, okay? So your caliper shouldn't be touching the inside edge, okay? And we're good. So they can go through, they just graze it. Now we need to address this because it's flipped up. It's probably too small. We probably don't want the look of that necessarily. So to get that back down, I'm gonna put my finger underneath, because if we push this all the way back down to the bat, you've lost your stopper. So we need to keep the stopper, but we want this to come back down. So I'm gonna put my finger underneath, and then I'm just gonna slowly push this back down. And I'll show you what it should look like here in a second. Okay. So you should be able to see your stopper, and then you should have your outside, okay? The stopper is gonna go down into the container. The outside edge is gonna catch on the outside edge of your container. Now, because we kind of were messing around with that, it's really important that you double and triple check your measurements again, okay? Because with all the pushing, we may have changed the measurement. So I'm gonna check outside, okay? and we've gone a little bit bigger. I'm gonna be okay with it. And then we wanna check inside. Inside measurement has to be pretty right on. Outside measurement can be a tiny bit bigger, just not smaller. Inside measurement, we want it to be pretty right on, okay? And that still slides through. So we're good. If you really do want it to be flush with the edge of your container, what I could do, put my finger under there, and I'm just gonna kind of push on it just a little bit to kind of compress it back in to see if I can't get it right on my measurement. We need outside again. Okay, that's pretty good. I could push it in a little bit more, but you get the idea. So you can kind of make tiny adjustments without having to cut it. You just have to be careful. There we go. That's pretty flush. Okay, now the handle. Obviously, and hopefully this isn't obviously, this is way too thick of a solid piece of clay, right? That would explode in the kiln. Also, not a very good handle. My fingers really just kind of slip off of it. So when you think of a handle, kind of think of a knob. We want something that we can grab, okay? Even with my hands being kind of slimy, I can grab this and I have a firm hold on it, okay? That's because it's thinner down here and then there's kind of like a knob on it, okay? You can get a little bit creative. Look at knobs on the internet. There's all sorts of different handles that you could make, but you just want to make sure that it's functional as a handle, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple different things. This container is small enough that I could probably get a knob that is small enough that it doesn't need to be hollow. It could just be a solid piece of clay. And if that's the case, by all means, go for it. I do want to show you though, like this one is hollow. Okay, so this whole piece is hollow. It would be way too big if it were a solid piece of clay. It would explode, okay? So I want to show you this just so that you know how. But if you can make, if it works with your lid to make a really pretty tiny handle, then that's fine with me, okay? It just has to kind of go and function as it should. So I'm just gonna start by cutting some of this off, because I don't need all of this. I'm just gonna kind of slice it with the needle tool. And there's a couple different ways to make this work. So the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna kind of just push in. You wanna make sure that you're keeping your fingers really wet. Otherwise, you're gonna push that whole thing or you're gonna pinch it right off. So keep your fingers really wet. The narrower it becomes, the more fragile it's gonna become. It's gonna wanna come off. Okay, and I just did that to make like a nice way to grip it. And then two things that you could do. One, you could kind of start to push in here. And maybe you're just gonna indent it. Okay, and maybe you're just gonna take the thickness away by kind of making an indent. Okay, so that's not very cute, but okay, I've gotten rid of a lot of that thickness, right, by making a hole in it. So if I did something like that, it would then probably be pretty okay, all right? Maybe you want an actual enclosed knob, like on my finished jar over here. So if you want that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna continue pushing down and we're gonna go all the way to the bat. Okay, so I'm gonna use one thumb, keep it really steady. I'm going all the way until my finger hits the bat. Okay, so I've hit the bat. You can see all the way in. Now, problem with this, if this is a cookie jar, what's happening to my cookies? There's a hole through my lid. What's happening to my cookies? They're gonna go stale. Okay, so we need to enclose this. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna treat this like its own little pot. I'm gonna pull up the walls a little bit. Okay, get closer to 1/4 of an inch. I'm gonna shape it a little bit, so I'm gonna push it in at the bottom. And then maybe I want do something like that, and then I'm gonna enclose this. So most of this is gonna go away here in a second. Okay, Okay, so I'm gonna get my fingers really wet. I'm gonna make little pinchers. And where I want it to start to come back together, I'm gonna start pinching in, and it should come back together, and this top piece will come off. And I've enclosed it again, and then you can kind of make adjustments. That didn't go super well. I made it a little bit thin, but now it's enclosed again, and it's not too thick. Okay. Oh, that's not cute. You get the idea though, right? Okay, and then what do you think I'm gonna do one more time before I call it? I'm gonna check my measurements again. Yep. Okay, so we're gonna go, let's see, what do we have on here right now? Outside measurements. Okay, those are still good. Because I was messing around with this clay, it could have kind of displaced it a little bit. So we just wanna make sure. Inside measurement, still good, okay? So then, if I measured everything correctly, when everything dries, and I would let them dry together, your lid should fit onto your container really nicely, okay? I would wait and let them dry out together, okay? If you wanna do anything on the outside, you can. I am gonna show you some new decorating techniques, not required, but just kind of neat to know. Not today though, we need to get closer to leather hard. So we will get there. Any questions? Okay, so rest of the period today we have, okay, we're done.